not finishing it and starting the next day with another bill. This has been a manufactured crisis, a deliberate crisis, purposely to run down the clock so that they can come up with this guillotine yet again, all to hide poor legislation. Whistle as many through as you can without any scrutiny. This is avoiding scrutiny. This is a disgrace for the people of Australia. We are supposed to represent the people of Australia. How can we represent them without doing proper scrutiny on the bills? We can't. It's been deliberate, purposely run down the clock, and it's devious. It is to hide the incompetence. So we say, ditch your motion, Senator Gallagher.
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Senator Ruston, are you still seeking the call? Senator Ruston.
Very much, Chair. Well, it's really quite interesting that we're in here having a debate about transparency or the lack of transparency. I just want to put on the record that as manager of government business, manager of opposition business, and also with the manager of business in this place with the Greens, we often communicate about what needs to be done to try and assure the smooth transition of legislation through this place, because we know the transition of that legislation is really important for the running of this country. Can I just say to you, at the beginning of this particular sitting period, I reached out to the managers of the respective parties and said, what is it that you want to have put through this week? In response to that, I got a list of legislation from the manager of government business that the government was hoping to put through this place. Constructively, I have worked to make sure that those bills that have been brought forward, which they have been brought forward over the preceding days, last week and this week, and we've passed a number of those pieces of legislation. Most particularly legislation in relation to the aged care bill that demonstrated the bipartisan support that we had offered to the government to make sure that the care for older Australians was embedded in the Act. That got passed. We also had a series of education bills in relation to higher education that we sat through the night on Monday night, I think it was, to make sure that those particular bills were passed. There have been a number of the bills that were put on the list by Senator Gallagher have been passed through this place in good faith, because they were the bills that the government told us that they were essential for being passed in this final sitting week or sitting fortnight of the year. At no time has the government ever indicated that it wanted to push through 37 bills. And I draw to the attention of this place and those listening the kind of bills that they are asking to shove through here. One of the bills actually relates to the Crown References Bill, actually relates to changing the terms in that bill from His Majesty or Her Majesty, which has been the case since this bill was first put into an action. To change that to now, instead of referring to His Majesty or Her Majesty, to referring to it as the Sovereign. So what we're seeing today is shoved through this place a bill that is so inconsequential in the middle of a cost of living crisis. Merely all it does is turns the term in relation to the Sovereign to a gender-neutral term. This is just a problem looking for a solution, looking for a problem. There was no problem. We did not need for today for this particular bill to go through this place. But it just demonstrates, I think, the lack of concern or consideration that this government has for the real issues that are facing the Australian public. They're more concerned about gender neutrality of our sovereign than solving issues that relate to cost of living. So obviously, the opposition is really concerned about the fact that they're trying to stuff through these bills that most of them we have not seen before, and we commend the crossbench for actually standing firm on this, because whilst we as the opposition have a level of resources to enable us to go through all of these bills and to try and work out what the consequences of them are, the crossbench in the space of less than 24 hours, in fact not much better than 12 hours, has been asked to consider all of these bills, consider their positions, understand what the amendments are. The amendments are just flowing in front of us as we speak. This is an absolute disgrace. It shows complete contempt and disrespect for this chamber, the Australian public,
the time
and
for
the
this
crossbench.
debate has expired. The question is that the suspension motion is moved by Senator Lambie be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. On the suspension? No. Yes. No. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. Lock the doors. So the question is that the suspension motion is moved by Senator Lambie be agreed to. The ayes shall move to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint Senator Goodell as teller for the ayes and Senator Ciccone as teller for the noes. Order. There being 32 ayes and 33 noes, the matter is resolved in the negative. I call the clerk.
Private Senators' Bills. Order of the day number 64, Criminal Code Amendment, Genocide, Crimes Against Humanity and War Crimes Bill 2024. Resumption of second reading debate.
Just a moment, Senator Faruqi. I think you were seeking the call. There's a lot of people standing. If you're not participating, motion again. I have asked those people not participating in this debate to either leave the chamber or take their seats. Senator Hanson-Young, no wonder people can't hear. Stop interjection. I think it was Senator Waters, my pardon. Stop interjecting, and I've asked the minister to put the request again. Minister.
Thanks, President. I seek leave to dispense of private senators' bills.
Is leave granted? The senator has sought leave to suspend private senators' bills. I'm asking to dispense with private senators' bills. Is leave granted? Leave is granted. Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the no. Leave is not granted. Senator Chisholm.
Pursuant to contingent notice.
Senator Chisholm, I'm sorry, you need to speak up, and I'm not sure if your mic is on.
Is there a script?
So I am advising the chamber, please resume your seat, Senator Chisholm. As the bill has been called on, the minister can move a motion that the matter be adjourned, that the debate be adjourned. Senator Chisholm.
I move that.
Just a moment, because I think Senator Hanson-Young is seeking the call. Senator Hanson-Young.
I am, President. I am seeking the call. Senator Faruqi was seeking the call before Senator Chisholm stood up and asked for something different than he should have, but in terms of the correct suspension versus adjournment, I would seek the indulgence of the chamber to allow Senator Faruqi to seek leave to table Senator Thorpe's speech on this matter, and then we can move on if that is the will of the chamber.
Senator Hanson-Young, what I saw, sit down please, Senator Faruqi, was a lot of people standing down at your end in particular. I saw Senator McKim pointing. I could not see anything other than that. And then I saw Senator Chisholm and Senator Faruqi shut the doors of the chamber, please. I then saw Senator Chisholm standing and Senator Faruqi standing, and the precedence, as you know, is to give the call to a minister, and that's what I did. But there's nothing. Yeah, you can. I guess Senator Faruqi can seek leave. I think that's. I'll just seek the advice of the clerk, Senator Faruqi. Senator, I'll just deal with Senator Faruqi. I've given her the call. Senator Faruqi.
Thank you, President. President, in the absence of Senator Thorpe, who was prevented from giving...
Senator Faruqi, I need to understand what it is you're seeking.
Okay. President, I seek leave to incorporate Senator Thorpe's speech to her bill on genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes to be incorporated in Hansard.
Thank you, Senator Faruqi. Senator Lambie, please resume your seat. Thank you. Is leave granted? Leave is not granted, Senator Faruqi. I'm now going to give the call to the Minister. Senator Chisholm.
I move debate be adjourned on the Prop Senators Bill.
So the question is that the motion is moved by Senator Chisholm be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it.
Free Palestine!
I call the clerk.
Palestine will be free!
I call the clerk.
Government business. Notice of motion number 1, standing in the name of the Minister for Finance, Senator Gallagher, relating to the routine of business for today.
Minister Gallagher.
Do I seek leave to move the amendment? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, President. I'm moving the motion that's in the notice paper. We will be moving some slight amendments to that motion, really to allow for further time, considering the time that we have lost this morning to that earlier debate, to push the times for the first votes on the bills listed in the notice of motion, instead of the bills being, and I think that's been circulated now, that the bills that we had listed to be considered at 11 a.m. to now be considered at 1 p.m. Because of the time we've lost this morning to that earlier debate. Again, for the bills that would be in the original motion being moved at put at 1:30, to move that to 4:30 p.m. Again, to allow for more time and debate, and for the tranche outlined at subsection 8, instead of being put at 5:30, to be put at 7. Again, this responds to the concerns of those opposite, to have time to speak to those bills, and from the crossbench as well. It also seeks to remove electoral reform, as we haven't been able to reach agreement on electoral reform, agreement that we had been seeking with the coalition. Again, no surprises there that we weren't able to do that at the last moment, so we are removing that and then insert. And as I said in the earlier debate from Senator Lambie's motion to suspend, we have moved this motion because these bills need to get done, and we have been frustrated this year in a minority chamber where we accept we do not have the votes to bring things to conclusion and to deal with things in a timely way, that this is, at the end of the year, our stocktake of important bills that we would like to get done. And we think there is a lot of agreement across this list, and these bills can be dealt with pretty promptly. I think there is agreement on a number of bills, and where there isn't agreement with one part of the Senate, there may be agreement with the other. So whether it's social media reform and the migration bills, obviously with the opposition, that we do believe that we would have support for bills like Future Made in Australia with another grouping in the chamber. So it is a shame that we have got to this point. It's not unusual for an end-of-year motion to be moved. I've certainly been, when we were in opposition, we tried to work constructively to get a whole range of bills through where we could. Sometimes it does require longer sittings of the Senate, but this is our request to the Senate, acknowledging that we will have to win each piece of legislation on its merits to deal with as much of this as is possible. Now, obviously, if there are bills here that don't get up, we have put them to the Senate and the Senate votes them down. That's the view of the Senate. I'm hoping that there are a range of bills in this motion today that will be supported by the Senate, because hopefully some common sense will prevail, that we will be able to progress a number of important pieces of legislation to get through today. Now, we would prefer that this had been more evenly spread through the year, but we have seen weeks where the opposition have refused to pass anything, where there has been long filibusters, where there's been, yes, it is true, it is true, it is absolutely true, where we have sat here and have not been able to progress one piece of legislation. And so that does build up a bank of bills that we would like to deal with before the Senate gets up for the year. And there is still a whole range of bills that we will come back to in February. But these ones, and most of them, really should be dealt with very quickly, that we would be able to progress through the Senate today. So I commend the motion and the amended motion. Do I need leave to amend?
Yes.
Yeah. So I seek leave of the chamber to amend the motion and taken together. As I said, those changes are minor in nature. It removes a bill, it inserts another one, and it has a longer period of time to allow for debate for people throughout the day on different tranches of legislation. So this is the government's view. These are our priority bills. We would like as much of them done as possible. We've already had a good week in the sense that we've got help to buy through, we've got wages for early childhood educators through, we've got funding for schools through. All of these things were important. We've got that done in the first part of this week, but we believe the Senate should have the opportunity to deal with the remaining bills throughout the course of today. Obviously, we are happy to continue to talk to people throughout the day as that motion progresses, but we do believe putting some order and process around these bills so that everybody knows what we are hoping to deal with is the way forward, and I commend the motion to the Senate.
Is leave granted? So is leave granted to have the motion considered in the revised format as outlined by the Minister? Leave is granted. Thank you. And I think you were seeking the call, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to move an amendment to the government's amendment and ask that after paragraph 4G add GA, tabling only of committee reports. And in moving this amendment, I just draw to the attention of what happens when you rush things. What happens when you rush things is you forget things. So we've got a number of really important reports that need to be tabled, but in their rush to put through this guillotine motion, and despite what the Minister says, this is unprecedented in the number of bills that are on this. that they forgot to put in the tabling of reports, some of which are very important, and also draw to the attention of the really important work of committee work that happens in this place. And part of the importance of that committee work is the fact that the reports of those committees need to be tabled. But we were apparently in the rush to get through this legislative agenda that no one had seen until last night at 8 o'clock. We forgot to put the committee reports in. So and I would also draw the chamber's attention to the fact that despite the minister's protestations about the significant importance of all of these bills, as I refer to my previous contribution, I cannot think of anything that would be less important in the middle of a cost of living crisis on the last day of sitting is actually to change the gender definition of His Majesty the King, who apparently now is going to be gender neutral going forward. That's apparently, supposedly, according to the minister's previous contribution in moving this motion, apparently is really, really important to the good governance of this country and the welfare of the people who we are privileged in this place to be at the parliament for. So can I just say, in moving my amendment, it is tremendously disappointing that today, despite the fact that we have got 38 bills on here, there will be no opportunity at all for proper scrutiny. And I have to say, having experienced putting bills through this place over the last 3 years, if there was one thing that has been an absolute hallmark of this government, is the fact that they don't deal with the detail, and there were always unintended consequences because of the shabby drafting of things, because their drafting instructions obviously are inadequate. And right now I am standing here moving an amendment to fix up a mistake because of their shabby instructions when they had this motion drafted and completely omitted putting in something really important like the tabling of reports. But I think the Australian public know that unless the scrutiny of this parliament is put over the legislation that's put into this place by those opposite, they will get substandard legislation. How many times we have turned up in here when we've scrutinised bills that they wanted to rush through without committee process, without due scrutiny, how many times we've come in here and had to make amendments. And I'll draw your attention to one that happened last week. We put through the aged care bill last week. 91 amendments by the government themselves as a result of a committee inquiry that this government didn't even want to have. So I think the Australian public has every right to be pretty disappointed at the disrespect that this chamber, through the motion by this government, is showing to them about the lack of scrutiny, because we know that the one thing that scrutiny does, it invariably improves the situation. It calls out unintended consequences, often ones that are likely to negatively impact on Australians. And I'd like to say I will absolutely guarantee you that in this whole list of bills here, there will be many, many, many bills that would have benefited from the scrutiny of this chamber. That is the reason we get paid every day to come here, is because our job is to scrutinise legislation. That is our job, and this government is forcing through this place a motion today to prevent us from doing our job, preventing us from doing the job of the Senate. It's the sole purpose that we exist, is for scrutiny, and you are circumnavigating that by refusing to allow the Senate to scrutinise these bills. And all I can say is I hope for your sake that there aren't unintended consequences in these bills that are going to negatively affect Australians, because so far you've done very little to consider the concerns of Australians in the legislation you've put through in this place. Cost of living is the most important thing that we should be dealing with in this place, not worrying about what the gender pronouns are of the sovereign.
Senator McKim.
Thanks very much, President. I won't hold the chamber up for very long, just to indicate that the Australian Greens are comfortable with the amendments that have been proposed to the substantive motion by the government, and we also accept the arguments that have just been put by Senator Ruston in relation to the amendment, which I understand will be an amendment to the government's amendment. And I invite you to just clarify that, President, when you're able, in terms of the process that the Senate will go through. And just flagging that on the assumption that an amended motion will be put to the Senate that we will be asking that certain questions be put separately on that, because we intend to vote a different way on different matters on that motion. So just a heads up for the chamber and you,
Thank
President.
you, Senator McKim. And just a moment, Senator Wong, because Senator McKim asked me a question, and yes, that we'll put Senator Ruston's amendment first, and then we'll go to the amendment moved by the minister. Minister Wong.
I was intending that I move that the motion be put. Obviously, there's an opportunity to debate the motion. We moved it in. We sought leave to move it.
So it's in the amendment form already. So if you close debate, that's the closure of the debate.
I was proposing to close debate so we could actually get on with debating the bills that you don't want to debate and some of the ones that you do want to debate. So, Senator Ruston. Senator Ruston.
Order. Senator Ruston. Senator Ruston.
This is Senator Ruston, everybody, this morning. Senator Ruston has been so helpful in getting so many bills through over as manager of opposition business. But anyway, are you intending, Senator?
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Ruston, you've just taken 12 minutes to put your point of view. The time now, you need to be silent. Minister Wong, please continue.
Well, I move that the motion be now put.
So we're going to put the motion. Yes, we're dealing with the. And shall I just give you the chair? Right. So we're dealing with the amendment as moved by Senator Ruston to Senator. Yes, beg your pardon, I'm jumping ahead. The question is that the question be put. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the aye. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. Senator Wong, are you seeking the call?
Rather than having a fight, we are supporting your amendment. So I'm proposing that we close this debate so we can vote on the amendment that we are supporting.
I have moved that the question be put and a division was called by the opposition. Yes.
Seeking clarification that the division that we're currently in is the question by Senator Wong to put the question. This is not a division on the question before the chair. Thank you.
To put the question on the matter before the Senate, which is Senator Ruston's amendment.
Yes. Division is cancelled. Thank you. Order. Order. There are way too many people interjecting. Question now is that the amendment as moved by Senator Ruston be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. Senators, I have called about 3 times. There are way too many senators standing up. If you're not participating in debates, please leave the chamber. Also, the advisors at the back of the room need to be sitting down, not wandering around. So the question now is that the motion is moved by Senator Gallagher be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Against? It is the motion as amended as moved by Minister Gallagher. Minister Wong.
I appreciate that there's been a bit of confusion on that side. As I understand it, the opposition or the chamber gave Senator Gallagher leave to move the hours motion in amended form.
Yes, that's correct.
So that is what is before the chair.
Yes, that's
Senator
correct.
McKim has requested that that be voted on separately. You are now putting that. I don't know if there are other speakers on the hours motion. And then I assume that there will be a set of separate votes, given that different senators are voting different provisions.
Yes.
That's my understanding.
So I put the question is now
I was just
others.
clarifying,
yes.
President.
Senator McKim.
Thank you, President, and thanks to Senator Wong for clarifying where we find ourselves. So, President, is it appropriate now to indicate which parts of this motion the Greens would like to be put separately?
Yes, because the motion's before the Chair, Senator McKim.
Thank you. So we are requesting that 6F, which is the Online Safety Amendment Social Media Minimum Age Bill 2024, 6H, which is Migration Amendment Removal and Other Measures, and Migration Amendment Prohibiting Items in Immigration Detention Facilities Bill. So that is 6F, 6H for Harry, and also 9J, which is the Veterans Entitlements, Treatment and Support Simplification and Harmonisation Bill 2024. So we're asking that those three, 6F, 6H and 9J, be put together separately so that we can vote a different way to our position on the rest of the motion.
Thank you, Senator McKim. So the question is that the motion be agreed to in respect of those three paragraphs as outlined by Senator McKim, which is 6F, 6H and 9J. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, President. Just wanting to make sure we've got clarity, and also just while we're checking in relation to one other aspect of this, because it's a very chaotic process being imposed upon the Senate by the government, that the function of, or the result of Senator McKim's request is, of course, for those three bills to be put separately but together, and that obviously the intent of the Greens in making that request, given what's required in the standing orders, is presumably that they are voting one way on all of the rest of the motion in its totality and a different way on those three particular bills.
Very well described. Thank you, Senator Birmingham. So I have put the question. I'm happy to put it again. So the question is that 6F, 6H and 9J be taken together and voted on. So those of that opinion say aye. My goodness, I've just spelled it out, but I will say it again. So the question that I'm asking for agreement on is the motion is moved by Senator Kim, which is 6F, 6H, 9J be taken together and moved as one, which is exactly as you described, Senator Birmingham.
President, could I propose that you should put the rest of the motion first, because in fact those clauses on their own are meaningless without the enabling clauses in the rest of the motion.
Well,
so it would make more sense to put
that I move them together,
the rest of the motion first,
I can do
excluding those three bills, and then to put those three clauses.
So the question now is, does any other senator wish to have or to vote in a different way if I put the remainder of this amendment without 6F, 6H and 9J? I'm not seeing anyone calling for... Yeah. So the question is that the motion be agreed to and that we treat separately 6F, 6H and 9J. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? No. I believe the ayes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. Okay. I have requested that the advisors at the back of the room remain seated. It is a privileged place. Well, lock the doors. So the question is that the amendment standing in the name of Senator Gallagher without 6F, 6H, 9J be agreed to. The ayes shall move to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint Senator Giacone as teller for the ayes and Senator O'Sullivan as teller for the noes. At Senator Hanson-Young. Order. There being 33 ayes and 34 noes, the matter is resolved in the negative. I am advised that as 6F, 6H and 9J don't have operative clauses to them, they are now redundant, and I call the clerk.
Government business, order of the day number 1, Online Safety Social Media Minimum Age Bill 2024, second reading debate.
All yours, then.
And I'll okay.
Order, Senators. For those of you who are not participating in this debate, could I ask that you leave the chamber quietly? If you are remaining in the chamber, please resume your seats and observe the proceedings in silence. Senator Kovacic.
Thank you. I rise today in support of this legislation, and I want to make one thing abundantly clear from the outset. The Coalition has always been firmly opposed to the implementation of a mandatory digital ID. There is rightfully widespread concern in the community about the security of personal data. With data breaches and leaks from major corporations dominating the news, it's entirely understandable that Australians are worried about the safety of their private information. But beyond the issues of data security, there is a much bigger concern at the heart of this debate: the growing dangers that social media poses for our children. And when it comes to the tech giants, platforms like Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram and TikTok, it's clear these mega corporations have shown time and time again that they have not prioritised our children's safety. I echo the very real concerns of many who reached out to me on this matter, and I want to be clear that I don't support any system, including a digital ID, that compromises the privacy and security of Australians. Such things should always be voluntary. Thanks to the efforts of the Coalition, the bill includes crucial safeguards that prevent social media companies from forcing anyone to hand over sensitive personal information or documentation. This bill is not about restricting individual freedoms or lecturing parents on how to raise their children. It's about giving parents the tools and support they need to protect their kids from the very real dangers that are online. The core focus of this legislation is simple. It demands that social media companies take reasonable steps to identify and remove underage users from their platforms. This is a responsibility these companies should have been fulfilling long ago, but for too long they have shirked these responsibilities in favour of profit. This is not a radical concept, it's a necessary one. Similar provisions are already in place in places like Florida, Utah and Louisiana, where social media companies are required to take reasonable steps to verify the ages of their users. These steps are overseen by regulators, ensuring that companies are held accountable for their actions. Under this legislation, failure to comply could result in fines of up to $50 million. Let's be clear, these companies have the capability to act. They can deploy their vast resources when they choose to do so. Take TikTok, for example. In 2023, TikTok removed 76 million underage accounts globally, including 1 million right here in Australia. So that's 76 million underage accounts globally they removed, and they did that of their own accord. And it wasn't too difficult, too complex, too hard, or anything like that. They just did it. They did this also without requiring digital IDs or any sensitive personal documentation. Instead, they used technology they already have, They use technology that they already use, the same technology that they can use to customise feeds and algorithms, which they do every single day. They use it to identify underage users. If TikTok can do this, so can other tech giants like Meta, which is valued at some $2 trillion. Imagine if there were a financial incentive to identify underage accounts. I expect we wouldn't have to wait too long to see some outcomes in that regard. Mark Zuckerberg and his billionaire peers have repeatedly demonstrated that they care more about money than they do about the safety and the mental health of our children. They have the ability to do this without compromising or changing any mechanisms of privacy that people have not already handed over when they open their own accounts voluntarily. This bill takes a big stick approach. It's the only way to get their attention and force them to make the changes that are so desperately needed. We must hold them to account, and this legislation does just that. Social media and the digital world is an ever-evolving tech behemoth, and it's long overdue for our laws to evolve with it. Ask any millennial what their online experiences were like 10 years ago, and compared to now, you'll see a massive shift, and it's not a good shift. It's not a positive one. Social media platforms for young people were once dominated by dedicated safe spaces for children. Sites like Club Penguin, where families felt confident that their kids were protected. But today that landscape has changed dramatically. Studies show that just a single exposure to extremist, racist, misogynistic or violent content can trigger algorithms that push even more harmful content to the viewer. Just one view, and then it can become part of your standard feed. So a child just needs to happen across it once, and then it'll keep coming. And we aren't talking about websites on the dark web. We aren't talking about obscure blogs on the depths of the internet. We are talking about content that is littered across TikTok, Instagram and Facebook. TikTok, which was deliberately designed to be addictive. Think about that for a moment. Do we really want 13-year-old children being exposed to this kind of platform and content, where their purpose was to make it addictive to our children? This should be unfathomable, yet here we are. The protection of children from the toxic elements of social media and the online space is one of the most urgent issues of our time. And this is not about telling parents how to care for their children. Parents are already doing everything that they can. But social media is one of the biggest problems discussed among parents across our country. I've spoken to countless parents who are literally crying out for help, telling me they need action to protect their children from the risks online. Polling from YouGov shows that 77% of parents support measures to safeguard children from the harmful effects of social media. Parents know the dangers these platforms pose for their children, and they want us to help them take action. They want us to help them protect their children. The data tells a harrowing story. The mental health of Australian children, especially girls, has deteriorated at an alarming rate over the past decade. Hospitalisations for self-harm among girls aged 10 to 14 have increased by over 300% in that time. Young boys are targeted by sexual predators, with the AFP reporting hundreds of incidents this year alone. And these are those that, and what about those that go unreported, where the parents are unaware of the grooming and attempted grooming of their children? There need to be mechanisms in place to minimise this as much as humanly possible. We had a hearing on Monday, albeit a brief one, in relation to this matter, and I was deeply disturbed by some of the comments from one of the witnesses who suggested that there was an exaggeration as to the harms found online. I don't think there's an exaggeration. I think it's very real, and I think it's incredibly problematic. And I think if we continue to pretend that it's not happening, it will continue to get worse and worse unchecked. We have a responsibility and an accountability to protect these children. I read an article recently which talked about the challenge of putting this genie back into the bottle. We can't walk away from this just because it's hard. We can't walk away from it just because it's uncomfortable. And we can't walk away from it just because, you know, some of the kids won't like it. And that's a reality. It's a shift and it's a change in what we have said is acceptable. But what we are saying here today is that we do not think it's acceptable for our children to be exposed to harms and predators online, and for that to continue to occur under our watch. These statistics should be a wake-up call for all of us. Social media, which we looked to connect us, is instead contributing to a growing crisis in our children's mental health. We cannot point to the issues of a loss of some of that connection as to the reason to cling on to it in the face of the damage being done to our children. It is not a zero-sum game. This is not just about the harmful content. Kids face pressure, bullying, and unrealistic beauty standards. They think that everything that they see there is how things should be. We all know as adults that what we see on social media is not necessarily real. Most of us had the opportunity to grow up without it forming our opinions. We owe that same ability to have a childhood to our own children. And we need to stop the toxic culture of comparison that these platforms offer and foster. This bill seeks to address these issues head-on and protect our children from the negative effects of social media. This legislation represents a major step forward in protecting the privacy and well-being of Australian families. The Coalition has worked to ensure that this bill includes critical privacy protections to ensure that no platform can force users to provide sensitive personal information such as digital IDs, driver's licences or passports. This is not about surveillance. It's about protecting our children in a world that is increasingly digital. I also want to highlight that while this legislation shapes an important step forward, it should be just the beginning. We must take further action to address another critical issue that is damaging the well-being of young people: the toxic prevalence and normalisation of pornography and its continued availability in the lives of children and adolescents. A study conducted this year by the Queensland University of Technology revealed a stark and disturbing reality. Pornography is playing a significant role in shaping young people's sexual understandings, expectations and experiences. Even more troubling is the finding that children as young as 8, 9 and 10 are being exposed to this harmful content online. We cannot hide from this and pretend it's somebody else's problem. It's our problem. This is insidious, damaging and cannot be ignored. The impact of early exposure to pornography is profound, distorting young minds and contributing to unrealistic and unhealthy views of relationships. We must extend our efforts to help parents protect their children from this dangerous content that they are too often exposed to, and take steps to limit the availability and accessibility of pornography to children. We need stronger laws and more comprehensive measures to tackle all of these issues head-on, and to ensure that we are doing everything in our power to safeguard the mental and emotional well-being of the next generation. This is a fight that we cannot walk away from. This is a necessary and meaningful step towards ensuring the safety of our children online. This bill will force big tech companies to take responsibility for the products and the services that they provide and make a lot of money out of, prioritising the well-being of young Australians over their commercial agendas and their profits. With this legislation, we can make a real, lasting difference in protecting the next generation. This is a pivotal moment in our country. We have drawn a line in the sand. The enormous power of big tech can no longer remain unchecked in Australia. Thank you.
Senator Henderson is next on my list, but Hanson, we will rotate the call as per Standing Order 186.
I'm glad for Standing Order 186. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. Well, I rise in relation to this piece of legislation, and firstly let me say what a disgrace it is that this bill, only tabled in the House of Representatives Thursday, is now has been railroaded and rushed through the process here across the parliament. Tabled in the House on Thursday, sent to a Senate inquiry that only sat for 3 hours on Monday. Submissions from stakeholders and interested parties were open for less than 24 hours on Friday. Talk about putting out the bins, taking out the rubbish. That's exactly how this whole bill has been treated by the major parties. And the reason that this bill is being rushed without scrutiny, without appropriate review, is because both the Leader of the Opposition, Mr Dutton, and the Prime Minister are worried that if people really knew about what the consequences of this piece of legislation mean, they wouldn't support it. Mr Dutton is desperate, despite all the hoo-ha and the flurry we've had in here this morning about rushing pieces through and guillotining bills through this place. This is the one piece of legislation that the Liberal coalition, the Liberal and the National Party, want rammed through this place this week. This is the one thing, and every Australian voter and every Liberal Party and National Party voter should hear this. The Liberal Party, the one priority they have this week is to smash this piece of legislation through without review. Why? Because Mr Dutton doesn't want people to notice. Mr Dutton does not want people to notice that despite the huge concern, the wheels falling off on his own side, the fact he can't keep his own people in the tent, he wants it rammed through at a minute to midnight, Christmas Eve, the last day of the parliamentary year, because he doesn't want people to notice. I mean, this is the bloke who talks tough. This is the bloke who says, you know, I will be tough on this and I will be tough on this and I will say what needs to be said. He is hiding. He is hiding on this bill and he's rushing it through and he doesn't want people to notice. What a load of gutlessness from the Leader of the Opposition. But of course, it suits the government of the day as well, because despite expert after expert after expert, this bill will not keep children or young people safe. It won't. And I understand the best endeavours and intentions of people in this place and around the country who want to make social media safer for our children and our young people. We need to make social media safer for everybody, for women, for people of colour, for those who are isolated, for older Australians who feel totally unable to engage and understand how quickly this technology has happened. We, of course, know it's senior Australians who are continually duped and tricked and targeted by scammers on social media. They need protection too. They need to be able to know that when they log on to Facebook or they open up YouTube or they participate in sharing their playlist on Spotify, young and old Australians have the right to know the platform is safe. We wouldn't expect that the rules of safety, respect, civil discourse are out the window in the car park at Coles. We don't think that just because something happens in the car park at Coles rather than the car park at Woolworths, that there is a different set of rules and standards and laws to be enforced. But here we have a situation where online and in social media, it's a free-for-all. So we do need to do something about making these platforms safer. For far too long, the big tech companies have hoodwinked governments, have hoodwinked bureaucrats, have set their own rules, made massive profits off self-regulating or non-regulating themselves. And it's time that that was reined in. But that's not what this bill does. This bill gives a false sense of security. It gives the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition a fig leaf to say they understand, they care about parents' concerns about children and young people online. But they're trying to fool Australian parents. They're trying to look like they're doing something while actually doing not much at all. I think this is really dangerous. Australian parents, a false sense of security is actually going to make things more harmful for our young people online, more harmful for women on social media, more dangerous for our young people, our teenagers who are already dealing with so many issues in this world. This is a bill that is the example of the emperor with no clothes. And Peter Dutton and Anthony Albanese, as the leaders of the two major parties who want to rush this through without scrutiny, they're standing there side by side naked. They don't have they are emperors with no clothes. And they want people to be fooled. We actually need a serious debate about what we do to make these platforms genuinely safer so that young people aren't exploited, targeted, harassed, that they're not in danger of harassment or distress. But that's not what this bill does. If this government really cared about making these platforms safer, you wouldn't be rushing this. You would be putting a duty of care on these platforms to make them responsible for ensuring they have a legal requirement and responsibility to protect their customers, to protect the users, to protect everyday people. But instead, this bill lets the big tech companies off the hook by pretending that young people can just be banned from the internet. It is fool's gold. And it's dangerous. Tech experts, mental health experts, youth advocates are all saying if we do this, the result will be twofold. One, young people will get around it, or they will find their way onto platforms on the dark web, which are far more insidious, which are much more dangerous and much harder for parents and legal enforcement, frankly, to keep an eye on what is going on. And secondly, for those that have been able to circumvent the rules and get themselves online, the tech companies have no obligation, no requirement to make sure if you get through the cracks, if you get online as a young person, that you'll be kept safe. So they'll either be pushed into the darkest parts of the web, and they won't want to tell their parents what's going on because they'll be worried their phone's going to be taken away. So they spiral further and further into isolation from their friends, their family, from medical experts who may be able to help them, school counsellors, teachers. They'll become even more isolated and vulnerable. Or if they're smart enough, like most kids around the age of 14, 15, you'll work out your way to crack the code, to get into Instagram, to get onto TikTok, to set yourself up on a social media platform with the false premise that it's only for adults. So they're going to be swimming around on a platform that has no obligation or concern for keeping children and young people safe. This is a disaster unfolding before our eyes. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. Prime Minister says he's worried about social media. The Leader of the Opposition says, let's ban it. It's a race to the bottom to try and pretend who can be the toughest, and all they end up with is pushing young people into further isolation and giving the platforms the opportunity to continue the free-for-all because now there's no social responsibility required. There's been some promises made around regulating the platforms to make them safer, make them more responsible, stop them from profiteering off harmful content. But none of that is in this bill. The social media ban is the emperor with no clothes. Fool's gold. It's pretend. It's like going to the reject shop, purchasing the dodgy floaties, putting them on your kids and then saying, there you go kids, jump in the deep end, see how you float. No parent would responsibly do that. And the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition shouldn't make them do it. This bill is rubbish. And I'm angry about it because it doesn't actually meet the needs, the very serious needs of the concerns and the very real concerns that parents have. It's pretend. The Prime Minister and Peter Dutton are pretending to deal with a very, very serious issue. There's a reason they didn't want this to go through a proper Senate inquiry. There is a reason they don't want people talking about it. There's a reason this is being done at the last minute of this parliamentary session, and it's because They know it's a bad piece of legislation, that it won't do what they say it will do, but they don't want people to know about it. Trying to fool the Australian population that they are doing this in the interests of children is abhorrent. They're not. They're doing it in their own political interests. This is a political fix, not a social media fix. The ban is rubbish.
Senator Hanson, just before I call you, Senator Henderson, sorry, Senator Hanson-Young, I think you had a second reading amendment you wanted to...
And I would ask that that be foreshadowed.
Thank you. Could you just move that for Senator Hanson-Young?
I move the second reading amendment in my name.
Thank you. Senator Henderson.
Thank you very much, Acting Deputy President. Well, the Coalition will be supporting this bill following its passage through the House yesterday. I am pleased to say that the Coalition has worked to strengthen the provisions of this bill. These are important changes which, in our view, have significantly strengthened the planned legislation in at least two areas. Firstly, in relation to privacy. There will be new provisions stating that people cannot be compelled to provide digital ID or government-issued identity documents such as driver's licences or passports under this legislation. We are pleased to see this supported in the recommendations of the Senate inquiry. Secondly, following our negotiations with the government, changes will be made so that the Communications Minister will be able to make rules specifying information which social media platforms are not able to collect in order to comply with the legislation. This will enable the Minister to make rules to ensure that guidelines issued under the legislation are appropriate and proportionate to the objectives of the law. These are both significant changes which materially strengthen the bill. It is important to get this bill right and that we pass it into law, because there are parents across Australia who are looking to us to take action now on the scourge of social media which is harming our young people. It deals with an issue on which the Leader of the Opposition, Mr Dutton, has once again led the national debate. In June, Mr Dutton committed to implementing an age limit of 16. He announced that a coalition government would raise the age of social media access to 16 and said it would be at the top of his priority list for his first 100 days in office. 5 months later, the Prime Minister has come on board with legislation which the Coalition has sought to strengthen, and I will have more to say on that shortly. This debate is the latest policy lead from the Coalition regarding online safety. We have been driving for action on age verification, particularly in the last year since the release of the roadmap for age verification was made public. We announced plans for a trial of technologies in November last year, including $6.7 million in funding, a figure almost identical to the number the government is now using for their trial. And it comes, of course, after the Coalition, as I say, led this debate. In the same month, we introduced legislation for the trial to occur. This builds on the fact that it was a coalition government which established the world-leading Online Safety Act. And so, a year after we sought to legislate action to strengthen efforts for online safety, here we are debating this bill. We are glad the government is now on board, and we are generally supportive of this bill, which seeks to protect Australian teenagers from the harms and tragedies linked to social media. This is a totemic issue for Australian families, and it is well past time that action was taken. We are debating a bill which provides a vital reform designed to help young Australians and their families for generations to come. We come to this parliament to help people in our communities across this nation. That is our task, and this bill seeks to achieve that. It will not only provide protections for our young, but importantly, it will also arm parents with the laws in place which will help them to set rules at home with their kids. For the mums and dads of Australia, that's a really important principle here, helping them to set protective boundaries for their children, opening up family discussions about the importance of online safety, and helping parents to get more involved in what is a really important issue for families. There is clear community support for these measures. Parents are telling us, and that's reinforced by a new poll from YouGov, which has shown that 77% of Australians back the under-16 social media ban. So let me speak to the bill. It is, of course, designed to set the age limit of 16 for young people to hold a social media account. This is aimed at reducing the harms which social media is causing to young people. The bill provides for a new, broader definition of social media companies, age-restricted social media platforms, which will now capture Snapchat, as well as other major social media platforms such as TikTok, Facebook, Reddit, Instagram and X. There will be a rule-making power for the Minister to exclude specific classes of services from the definition. This would carve out messaging services, online games and services which support health and education of users, which would include YouTube, as well as WhatsApp, Messenger Kids, Reach Outs, Peer Chat and Google Classroom. It requires relevant social media companies to take reasonable steps to prevent age-restricted users from having an account with the social media platform. As I mentioned earlier, privacy issues are of the utmost importance to us in the Coalition, and we have worked extremely hard to strengthen this legislation. The bill prohibits platforms from using information collected for age assurance purposes for any other purpose unless explicitly agreed by the individual. Once information has been used for age assurance, it must be destroyed unless the individual agrees to it being retained. Failure to delete information constitutes a breach of the Privacy Act and will attract significant penalties. The Office of the Australian Information Commissioner will also provide oversight of the privacy provisions related to this bill. Driving the need for these laws, we know there is widespread concern and evidence about the severe mental health impact of social media on children. We have seen disturbing global trends in youth mental health since the rise of social media, especially for girls. According to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, there has been a more than threefold increase in the rate of intentional self-harm hospitalisations for girls under 14 from 2008-09 through to 2022-23. In recent years, there have been large increases in the rate of mental health issues amongst children and young people. As a 2022 independent report on self-harm, commissioned by Australia's Therapeutic Goods Association noted, there have been very large increases in all intentional self-poisonings in older children, adolescents, ages under 10 to 19, worldwide over the recent decade. Leading psychologist Dr. Simon Wiltsch, a strong supporter of setting an age limit for social media, said, a 200% increase in 10 to 14-year-olds experiencing an eating disorder over the last 12 years strongly overlaps with the rapid growth in social media use by children. Clinical psychologist Dr. Danielle Einstein told the Senate inquiry into this bill that any benefits of social media to mental health are far outweighed by the disadvantages. She said, "I do not see any benefits for mental health from social media. I've looked really hard at the evidence, and even if there were to be some, I think they are far outweighed by their disadvantage. But for mental health, I do not see any benefits." We also recall that it was the US Surgeon General who made the important point: the mental health crisis among young people is an emergency, and social media has emerged as an important contributor. We simply cannot ignore such evidence. The harm being caused to young Australians has also been demonstrated in the tragic cases which we have seen in News Corp's Let Them Be Kids coverage. Families torn apart after their children fell foul to social media. And I would also like to pay credit to the work of the 36 Months Group, which has also secured nearly 128,000 signatures from people urging the age limit to be raised to 16. In recent weeks and months, we have seen here in this building a number of the parents of children who have died after falling foul of social media. Some have been carrying the ashes of their dead daughter or son. They have told terrible, tragic stories. Their lives and families torn apart by social media. We must honour them and the memories of their children. We owe it to our communities to get this done and not to be distracted by those often well-meaning people who may say this is too hard or the kids will get around this. We support the legislation and highlight the work of the Coalition to strengthen this legislation, particularly in relation to privacy, which we have strongly argued is extremely important. Acting Deputy President, I support this bill because it is the right thing to do. We should not delay. We should get this important reform done right now. Thank you.
Senator Sharma.
Acting Deputy President, let me commence by saying that I share the concerns of some of my colleagues that the process for considering this bill has been suboptimal, to say the least. The amount of time provided for experts and interested parties to make submissions, the amount of time for the Senate committee to consider this legislation. Indeed, the lack of supporting evidence that we've been able to marshal. And I would have to point the finger here at the government. This is something that the opposition has been calling on for some time. It's the testing of age verification technology, and the trial is something that the Safety Commissioner first proposed at least 2 years ago, that the opposition encouraged the government to move expeditiously with. And if that trial had commenced when it should have done and concluded by now, we would be having a more informed discussion about some of the technological solutions available. In short, I would have liked more time, and I think the Senate and our processes deserve more time to consider this. But at the same time, I'm not someone who likes to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and I recognise that in the words of Bismarck, the making of legislation is often like the making of sausages. It can be ugly and particularly indecorous at times, but it's how things get done. And I recognise there is an opportunity in this parliament at this time to pass this legislation, even with these deficiencies in process, and I don't believe that's an opportunity we should let slip. Now, I approach this issue, indeed any issue of government regulation and intervention into the private lives of individuals, and particularly households and parents, as a sceptic and needing to be convinced of what is the argument here for why government should be able to limit the freedom of children in this instance and, in some respects, remove or curtail the rights of parents and their own decisions about how they raise their children. And I respect those of my colleagues here and elsewhere who've made that point. To counter that, I would just make two fundamental propositions. Firstly, in my reading of the evidence that it's available, the evidence of harm is quite overwhelming, and the evidence of benefit, if you like, is quite limited. But I would also say that protecting children from harm is a conservative proposition. It's about helping preserve families, protect people who are vulnerable, whose capacities and abilities have not yet reached the age of maturity. And it's a different proposition than interfering in the lives and the freedoms and the choices of fully formed consenting adults. And we recognise this, of course, in a number of ways. Children do not have the same rights as adults. And in this instance, in this vertical, if you like, I think the case is equally well made. I do believe that the evidence that unregulated access to social media is harming children is overwhelming. I think if you've read Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, subtitled How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness, I do think the evidence is well marshalled in that book, and I think it has a strong empirical basis, and this harm seems to be especially pronounced amongst girls, not only girls of course, but predominantly amongst girls. Now, this doesn't mean that every child who uses social media is likely to encounter harm. In fact, overwhelmingly they're not. This is really about quite a small minority, but a small but significant enough minority. And the harm can go from the more extreme ends, ostracisation leading to bullying, leading to self-harm, and in the most tragic cases, suicide, the development of obsessive characteristics, the development of eating disorders, and those individual instances have been well documented, including here in Australia. Doubtless social media wasn't the sole cause of that. It was only a contributing factor, but nonetheless an important contributing factor. But even for those children who do not suffer such harms, and I recognise that that is the overwhelming majority of such users, they still face some of the more benign consequences: attention fragmentation, addiction, social deprivation, distraction, irritability, obsessive behaviour, and often just the opportunity cost of spending a large amount of time on social media, which means you're not spending time with your family, you're not spending time with your friends, you're not doing exercise, you're not doing your homework, you're not reading a book, you're not getting proper sleep. And this is because these social media platforms play on and lean into ingrained human characteristics and evolutionary habits that we've developed over a number of years to effectively get us hooked. They play on our desire for new information and new input. That's a trait we've developed as a species that always had to concern ourselves with imminent threats to our survival, and which meant we always prioritised new and incoming information and were hypersensitive to it because it alerted us to changes in our environment. That's the sort of dopamine release cycle. But even social comparison. Humans being a social animal means we spend a lot of time managing our relations and trying to navigate the hierarchy of our social relations, and social media plays into that. Our desire for affirmation, our desire for friendship, our desire for social status, our desire for social competition in many respects. And in some respects, social media exacerbates some of these traits. Well-known phenomenon of audience capture, where a social media persona leans into those characteristics, if you like, in their digital life, which reflects in their regular life, those characteristics that seem to generate the most attention or likes or affirmation, which can send people down quite a diverting trajectory, if you like. Prestige bias, where people look at who is successful in social media terms, who does have the most followers, who does get the most likes, who seems to drive the most engagement on their account, and they model themselves on those sorts of behaviours. And often, as we would all know, the people who seem to do well on social media are often provocateurs, they're often outlandish, they often embrace extreme attributes, if you like, and indeed they're encouraged to do so by the way that the way people build an audience on social media. There are some benefits to children using social media, and I don't discount that. It's a way for them to stay in touch and stay connected, and we all saw this during the COVID pandemic when our children weren't going to school. And they stayed in touch through messaging platforms, through social media platforms, and it allows them to build and maintain a social circle. I also appreciate that for people who are isolated geographically or socially or otherwise, it provides them a way to build a community which might not be available to them in the real world. But I would say that the benefits of children using social media overwhelmingly accrue to the digital platforms. I mean, this is why they are so interested in maintaining the status quo, because they monetise the children's audience. They're able to sell that to advertisers. The committee heard evidence of about, I think, $11 billion US that was accruing to digital platforms in advertising revenue from that market alone, from the under-18 audience alone. So this is a valuable audience. I mean, we know this from children's television. Advertisers like capturing the attention of children, and if a social media platform can say it commands so many hours a day of a child's time, that is a valuable commodity that they can then on-sell. That is where I believe the benefits overwhelmingly accrue. The last thing I would like to say here is that I think parents need help with this, and this is why I think there's a case for government intervention. Partly because parents have to grapple with the ubiquity of phones and electronic devices, and the crude measure that some suggest, which is take away your kid's phone or give them a non-smartphone without any of these apps, I don't think is particularly realistic. I think in today's era we expect our children to be able to be contacted and contactable, and this is especially true in the situation in many households today when both parents are working and they often are not home when the children might be home or coming home from school. There's also the sheer ingenuity and cleverness of children. Many parents would know this, that children are ingenious at getting around any technical blocks you might seek to fix. Children, you hear stories of parents saying, make sure you delete all these apps. The children download them again and label them as something else, and the parents say no, they create new identities or new user IDs. But overwhelmingly, I think the main area parents need help is with the problem of collective action. It has to be a brave parent or a courageous parent or a particularly self-assured or confident parent that will say, all my children's friends and all of his or her social group are on a platform, connect, but I'm going to... But if there's a situation where it is normalised that children under 16 are not on social media all the time, it is normalised that they socialise in more traditional ways, then parents, I think, will feel more comfortable in leaning into that legislative norm. Now, there are some legitimate concerns around this piece of legislation, and I know my colleagues across this chamber, some of them have expressed them and some of them will. Firstly, that this will be imperfect. I don't doubt it will be. It's new legislation. It hasn't been robustly tested. It is used in some jurisdictions around the world, but it has not been widely tried or used. Children will probably find workarounds to it. They'll potentially use VPNs. They will find a way to fake their identity or fake their age, if you like. They will find, they'll migrate to other platforms. I don't doubt that's true, but I think this is as much about introducing some friction into the process. And we recognise this in lots of spheres of life where government seeks to regulate. Even, as a homeowner, you never expect your home will not be broken into entirely, but you're still going to put deadbolts on the windows and lock the doors and maybe security grill around your window, knowing that it won't be perfect protection against burglary, but it will make that job a little bit harder. Well, I think this legislation is really about introducing some friction into the process and perhaps tipping the normal point, if you like, between children being overwhelmingly online to being somewhat less overwhelmingly online. There are also important concerns about privacy, and I share those concerns, and I think the amendments that the Coalition will be introducing will seek to strengthen protections on privacy. It's important to emphasise this. We don't expect, and I think we would be opposed to, any digital platforms seeking hard forms of identification from users of any age to verify their identity. We do not expect, and it it is not part of this legislation that people will be expected to hand over their driver's licence or their passport details or their Medicare card. We expect social media platforms to use their existing data sets, if you like, and technology and other behavioural tells to make a reasonable estimate of someone's age and take reasonable steps, as the legislation says, to assure them of their age. This doesn't mean it will be perfect. It means that there will be some under-16s who are able to fool the social media platforms. It might be, I anticipate this might be the case, it might be people who are over 16 who aren't able to and who should be allowed to use the platform and will not be able to. But I would say that this technology does exist, and we've seen that. TikTok has used the technology. They told a Senate inquiry just earlier this year that they've removed about 1 million underage users from their platforms, not by asking them their age, but by tracking, if you like, detecting the patterns of their behaviour that most correlate with a particular age cohort. We have US jurisdictions that are already introducing and using this, amongst them Louisiana, Texas, Tennessee, Florida, not known as bastions of social progressivism, often quite Republican-leaning and relatively conservative electorates, but they have firstly introduced and embraced this legislation. But secondly, the digital platforms operating in those jurisdictions have had to find a way to comply with this legislation. So the technology does exist, and with a nudge or a push from our government and this government, that technology will get better. Importantly as well, it will be some time until this legislation comes into effect, and the Parliament will have a regular opportunity to review it and review its operation. And I think that will be important because I recognise this is a new piece of legislation. Now, I'm not going to stand here and pretend that this piece of legislation, if passed, will stop bullying or stop the development of eating disorders or stop social isolation. There's a range of contributing factors to that. But if we can provide some help to parents in the right direction to help lessen the potentiation, the kind of super acceleration that social media platforms provide to some of these things, I think that's a step forward.
Thank you, Senator Sharma. Senator Shoebridge, you've got about 4 minutes.
Thanks very much, President. I firstly want to associate myself with the contribution from my colleague, Senator Hanson-Young. I think she hit the nail on the head in her takedown of this incredibly inappropriate and rushed piece of legislation. But let's call it out for what it is. This is a deeply flawed and dangerous proposal by people who appear to have never been on the internet or met a teenager. It's a bill to appease Rupert Murdoch and the news stable, and whose implementation, if we ever get that far, will be a hot mess. This is the kind of legislation that's brought to Parliament by a Prime Minister and a bunch of people in Labor and the opposition who get their staff to print their emails out for them. I mean, that's the legislation we've got before us. And the evidence against it is literally overwhelming. We have child mental health experts who say that this could dangerously isolate many kids who use social media to find essential support at particular times when they need it. We have IT and governance specialists who say it cannot work. We have privacy advocates who are saying this will reach into everybody's privacy, everybody who engages in social media, not just kids, but adults. We have human rights organisations who are all, pretty much all, in opposition to this law. We have government agencies like the OAIC who say don't do this. It's an extraordinarily broad alliance of people, and I can't really recall such a kind of united breadth of opposition to legislation that Labor and the Coalition, Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton, both whose names start with Mr, are joining together to ram through with a sham inquiry in the sort of last few hours of parliamentary sitting this year. And Why are that group of people, the mental health experts, IT and government specialists, privacy advocates, human rights organisations, why are they all joining together to oppose this legislation? Because this policy will hurt vulnerable young people the most, especially in regional communities and especially LGBTQI community, by cutting them off from the support that they need and the support that they can sometimes only get on social media. And to be clear, it has not worked anywhere in the world where these kinds of thought bubbles have grown and then popped. So why? Why are we ramming it through with so little scrutiny here? And why does the Albanese Labor government suddenly want to work on absolutely everything?
Thank you,
with
Senator
Mr.
Shoebridge.
Peter
The
Dutton?
time for this debate has concluded. You'll be in continuation. It being 11:15, are there any notices of motion to be given for another day? Senator O'Neill.
Pursuant to notice given yesterday on behalf of the Standing Committee for the Scrutiny of Delegated Legislation, I withdraw business of the Senate Notice of Motion number 1 for 12 sitting days after today, proposing the disallowance of the Explosive Regulations 2024.
Thank you, Senator O'Neill. Is there a report from the Selection of Bills Committee? Senator Urquhart.
The 14th report of 2024 of the Selection of Bills Committee, and I seek leave to have the report incorporated in Hansard.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted. Senator Urquhart.
I move that the report be adopted.
Senator Chisholm.
I move the following amendment. At the end of the motion, add, and the Competition and Consumer Amendment, Australian Energy Regulator Separation Bill 2024, not be referred to committee.
So the question is, Senator McKim.
Thank you, President. I would like to move an amendment to Senator Chisholm's amendment. It's an amendment that's been circulated in my name, and that is that in respect of the Electoral Legislation Amendment, Electoral Reform Bill, the Electoral Legislation Amendment, Electoral Communications Bill, provisions that those bills be referred immediately to the Finance and Public Administration Legislation Committee for inquiry and report by the 3rd of February, and also in the same move to amend Senator Chisholm's amendment, I include the other matter that's been circulated in my name on the same sheet, which is that the Migration Amendment prohibiting items in Immigration Detention Facilities Bill 2024 be referred immediately to the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Legislation Committee for inquiry and report by the 10th of February.
I don't have that amendment, that migration one, Senator Kim, but it might be that it's only me who doesn't have it.
Just for clarity, it's on the same sheet as the other one.
Sorry. I read it but didn't register. I'll just seek the advice of the clerk. Yes, so I am advised. So Senator Ruston asked for clarification about whether she should put her amendments now. The clerk's advised me to check to see if anyone wants to speak so far. Senator Shoebridge.
Yeah, I
Senator
do. Thanks.
Shoebridge.
Thanks very much, President. I wish to speak to why we need to refer the Migration Amendment prohibiting items in Immigration Detention Facilities Bill 2024 to inquiry. This is legislation that, when it was twice presented by the opposition under the name of then Minister Peter Dutton, that Labor opposed, because in 2017 and 2020 Labor seemed to have at least some kind of moral compass when it comes to migration and people seeking asylum. And why did Labor oppose it? Together with the Greens, and we had a progressive majority to oppose that legislation in 2017 and 2020, the same progressive majority that would be available if Labor still had progressive views, even slightly, on migration and people seeking asylum. But the reason it was opposed in 2017 and 2020 by the same Labor Party that's now presenting it in their own name is because this is a vicious attack on the rights of people who are held in immigration detention who are not held there because they've committed any crime, who are not held there as punishment, but are being held there by increasingly draconian laws that are holding more and more people in detention. And why Labor opposed it in 2017 and 2020, and why the Greens opposed it in 2017 and 2020, and it's the same reason the Greens are opposing it in 2024, because we're consistent with our principles. It's because taking away people's mobile phones while they're in immigration detention run by some of the most loathsome international corporate bottom feeders you could imagine, who globally profit off holding people in detention around the world, the likes of Serco, who are notorious for human rights abuses. The reason why we oppose taking away people's mobile phones is because sometimes that's the only accountability measure they have. They can take images of the abuse they're suffering. They can talk to journalists and politicians and people outside those hateful institutions run by private corporations designed to be cruel, and the mobile phone is their one chance to talk to the outside world and actually shine at least something of a light on the violence and the abuses of human rights. And I think why Labor wants to take that away is because they want to run a secretive immigration detention centre here. And with this same bill, where they're taking away that accountability measure, that one lifeline that people with no other rights have in these private jails run by global jailing corporations, which are notorious for human rights like Serco, Labor wants to take away that accountability measure and at the same time empower those same private corporations to strip search detainees without warrants, to put dogs into the detention centre without warrants. In the same legislation, you take away the accountability measure and then you add additional human rights abuses in the same legislation. Legislation that twice Labor voted against when then Minister Dutton and the Coalition were in power. The Coalition must be looking at Minister Tony Burke and Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and say, you only get one of these in your lifetime, don't you? This combination of people in high office who are willing to give these appalling powers to people in control of detention centres, who are willing to deliver more than the Coalition could ever achieve in terms of cruelty and human rights abuses. And they're looking at Labor Party in 2024 and saying, actually, you are meaner and nastier and crueler and with even less principles than the Coalition has. You want to know why we want to refer this off to an inquiry? Because it stinks. Because it's vicious and it's mean and it's nasty and it's a betrayal of any sense of decency and principle. And it's cheap, grubby politics from Labor. And if they think they can out-Dutton Dutton, think again. This is just the start of it. It should end here.
Thank you, Senator Shoebridge. Does any other senator wish to make a contribution on the selection of bills report or any of the amendments? Because then my intention is to put all of the amendments. Okay. So I think we're starting with Senator Chisholm's amendment. Beg your pardon, Senator McKim's amendment. So the question is that Senator McKim's amendment to the Minister's amendment be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? No. I believe the noes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. Yes, Senator Roberts. No, you can. You want A and B put separately?
Yes, please.
I'll just indicate that to the chamber when we
Thank you.
get to the division.
Matt.
Thank you. Lock the doors and just indicate to the chamber that Senator Roberts has asked that A and B of Senator McKim's amendment to the selection of bills committee report be put separately. So I intend to put A in the first instance. So the question is that the amendment is moved by Senator McKim to the selection of bills committee report A be agreed to. The ayes shall move to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint Senator McKim as teller for the ayes and Senator Askew as teller for the noes. Yeah, no. Order. There being 16 ayes and 25 noes, the matter is resolved in the negative. So I now intend to put Part B. So the question is that Part B of the amendment moved to the selection of bills committee report moved by Senator McKim be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the noes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 1 minute. lock the doors. So the question is that Part B of the amendment to the Selection of Bills Committee report moved by Senator McKim be agreed to. The ayes shall move to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint Senator McKim as teller for the ayes and Senator Askew as teller for the noes. Order. There being 14 ayes and 26 noes, the matter is resolved in the negative. Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, President. Could I move that at the end of the motion we add, and in respect of the Competition and Consumer Amendment Australian Energy Regulator Separation Bill 2024, the provisions of the bill be referred immediately to the Environment, Communications and Legislation Committee for inquiry and report by the 6th of March 2025.
Yes, I think that's fine. So the question is the amendment as moved and amended by Senator Ruston to the Selection of Bills Committee report be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the noes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. Lock the doors. So the question is that the amendment moved by Senator amended and moved by Senator Ruston to Senator Chisholm's amendment to the Selection of Bills Committee report be agreed to. The ayes shall move to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint Senator Askew as teller for the ayes and Senator Urquhart as teller for the noes. There being 29 ayes and 29 noes, the matter is negated. I now intend to put Senator Chisholm's amendment and then Senator Mackenzie's amendment. So the question is that the amendment as moved by Senator Chisholm to the Selection of Bills Committee report be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. I'll now call Senator Mackenzie or Senator Ruston.
On behalf of Senator Mackenzie, I move at the end of the motion add, and respect of the National Organic Standard Bill 2024, the bill be referred immediately to the Rural and Regional Affairs Transport Legislation Committee for inquiry and report by the 31st of January 2025.
Thank you, Senator Ruston. So the question is that the amendment as moved by Senator Ruston in the name of Senator Mackenzie be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. So the question now is that the amended Selection of Bills Committee report be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. I'll now proceed to the placing of business. Is it desired to postpone or rearrange the business? Senator Chisholm.
I move that general business notice of motion number 730 be considered during general business today.
So the question is that the motion is moved by Senator Chisholm be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. I call the clerk.
No postponement notifications have been lodged, but committees have lodged extension notifications as shown at item 8 on today's order of business.
Thank you. If there is no objection, those committees' reports are authorised. It is with deep regret that I inform the Senate of the death on the 14th of November 2024 of the Honourable John Charles Hodges, a former minister and member of the House of Representatives for the Division of Petrie in Queensland from 1974 to 1983 and from 1984 to 1987. I understand that arrangements will be made to move a motion of condolence at a future date. So I'll now move to formal business, and I call on Business of the Senate number 1, standing in the name of Senator Payman.
President, I withdraw the motion.
Thank you, Senator Payman. I'll now move to government business number 2, standing in the name of Senator Gallagher. Senator Chisholm.
I table a letter regarding estimates from Senator Wong.
Thank you.
And I ask that government business notice of motion number 2 relating to estimates hearings for 2025 be taken as formal.
Is there any objection to this motion being taken as formal? There being none, I call Senator Chisholm.
I move the motion.
So So the question is that the motion is moved by Senator Chisholm be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. I'll now move to General Business 716, standing in the name of Senator David Pocock.
Thank you, President. I withdraw General Business motion number 716.
Thank you, Senator David Pocock. I'll now move to 720, standing in the name of Senator Dean Smith. Is that you, Senator Askew?
Yes. On behalf of Senator Dean Smith, I ask that General Business Notice of Motion number 720 be taken as a formal motion.
Is there any objection to this motion being taken as formal? There being none, I'll call Senator Askew.
I move the motion.
So the question is that General Business Notice of Motion number 720, standing in the name of Senator Dean Smith and moved by Senator Askew, be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the noes have it. The ayes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. Lock the doors. So the question is that general business 720 in the name of Senator Dean Smith and moved by Senator Askew be agreed to. The ayes shall move to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint Senator Askew as teller for the ayes and Senator Urquhart as teller for the noes. Order. There being 30 ayes and 29 noes, the matter is resolved in the affirmative. I now move to general business notice of motion number 721, standing in the name of Senator Hodgins-May.
I ask that general business notice of motion number 721 be taken as a formal motion.
Is there any objection to this motion being taken as formal? There being none, I call Senator Hodgins-May.
I move the motion.
So the question is that general business notice of motion number 721, standing in the name of Senator Hodgins-May, be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 1 minute. Is 1 minute? Lock the doors. So the question is that general business notice of motion number 721, standing in the name of Senator Hodgins-May, be agreed to. The ayes shall move to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint Senator McKim as teller for the ayes and Nick, I haven't called tellers, sorry. I did call your name, but we just rechecking. Are we good to go? So the question is that general business notice of motion number 721, standing in the name of Senator Hodgins-May, be agreed to. The ayes shall move to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint Senator Askew as teller for the ayes and Senator Urquhart as teller for the noes. Order. There being 41 ayes and 17 noes, the matter is resolved in the affirmative. I'll now go to general business notice of motion number 722, standing in the name of Senator Henderson. Is that you, Senator Askew? Great.
On behalf of Senator Henderson, I ask that general business notice of motion number 722 be taken as a formal motion.
Is there any objection to this motion being taken as formal? There being none, I call Senator Askew.
I move the motion.
So the question is that general business notice of motion number 722, standing in the name of Senator Henderson and moved by Senator Askew, be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? Believe the ayes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 1 minute. Lock the doors. So the question is that general business notice of motion number 722, standing in the name of Senator Henderson and moved by Senator Askew, be agreed to. The ayes shall move to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint Senator Askew as teller for the ayes and Senator Urquhart as teller for the noes. Order. There being 42 ayes and 17 noes, the matter is resolved in the affirmative. I'll now move to general business notice of motion number 723, standing in the name of Senator David Pocock.
Thank you, President. I ask that general business notice of motion number 723 be taken as a formal motion.
Is there any objection to this motion being taken as formal? There being none, I call Senator Pocock.
Thank you. I move the motion.
So the question is that general business notice of motion number 723, standing in the name of Senator David Pocock, be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? The ayes have it. We'll now move to general business notice of motion number 724, standing in the name of Senators Thorpe and Payman.
Thank you, President. I ask that general business notice of motion number 724, proposing the introduction of a bill, be taken as formal.
Is there any objection to this motion being taken as formal? There being none, I call Senator Payman.
I move the motion.
So the question is the motion is moved by Senator Payman be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. Senator Payman.
I ask that general business notice of motion number 7...
aren't you introducing a bill? Have a DIT there to assist you?
I present the bill and move that this bill may proceed without formalities and be now read a first time.
So the question is that the motion is moved by Senator Payman be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. I call the clerk.
For an act to amend the law relating to the funding of illegal settlements and for related purposes.
Senator Payman.
I move that this bill be now read a second time and I seek leave to table an explanatory memorandum relating to the bill.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted. Senator Payman.
I table an explanatory memorandum and I seek leave to have the second reading speech incorporated in Hansard and to continue my remarks.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted. Thank you, Senator Payman. I'll now move to general business notice of motion number 725, standing in the name of Senators Thorpe and Payman.
I ask that general business notice of motion number 725 proposing the introduction of a bill be taken as formal.
Is there any objection to this motion being taken as formal? There being none, I'll call Senator Payman.
I move that the following bill be introduced.
So the question is that the motion is moved by Senator Payman be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. Senator Payman.
I present the bill and move that this bill may proceed without formalities and be now read a first time.
So the question is the motion is moved by the Senator Payman be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. Call the clerk.
Bill for an act to amend the law relating to defence trade controls and for related purposes.
Senator Payman.
I move that this bill be now read a second time and I seek leave to table an explanatory memorandum relating to the bill.
Thank you. Is leave granted? Leave is granted. Senator Payman.
Table an explanatory memorandum and I seek leave to have the second reading speech incorporated in Hansard and to continue my remarks.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted. Thank you, Senator Payman. I'll now move to general business notice of motion number 726, standing in the name of Senators Thorpe and Payman.
That general business notice of motion number 726 proposing the introduction of a bill be taken as formal.
Is there any objection to this motion being taken as formal? There being none, I'll call Senator Payman.
I move that the following bill be introduced.
So the question is the motion is moved by Senator Payman be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. I call the clerk. Beg your pardon, Senator Payman.
I present the bill and move that this bill may proceed without formalities and be now read a first time.
So the question is the motion is moved by Senator Payman be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. I call the clerk.
A bill for an act to require some entities to report on the risks of genocide in their operations and supply chains and actions to address those risks, to establish the Australian Anti-Genocide Commissioner and for related purposes.
Senator Payman.
I move that this bill be now read a second time and I seek leave to table an explanatory memorandum relating to the bill.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted. Senator Payman.
I table an explanatory memorandum and I seek to have the second reading speech incorporated in Hansard and to continue my remarks.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted. Thank you, Senator Payman. Senator Canavan.
Madam President, I ask the general business notice of motion number 727 be taken as a formal motion.
Is there any objection to this motion being taken as formal? There being none, I call Senator Canavan.
I move the motion.
Senator Chisholm.
Seek leave to make a short statement.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted for 1 minute. Thank you, Senator Chisholm.
The government will not be supporting this motion. The Select Committee has already heard from the market bodies. The market bodies have the opportunity to respond to questions on notice. The bodies, especially AEMO, should be focused on their responsibility to maintain secure electricity and gas systems.
Thank you, Senator Chisholm. So the question is that general business notice of motion number 727, standing in the name of Senator Canavan, be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? No. I believe the noes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. Lock the doors. So the question is that general business notice of motion number 727, standing in the name of Senator Canavan, be agreed to. The ayes shall move to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint Senator Askew as teller for the ayes and Senator Urquhart as teller for the noes. Order. There being 33 ayes and 32 noes, the matter is resolved in the affirmative. I'll now move to general business notice of motion number 728, standing in the name of Senator Thorpe. Is anyone moving that motion? I intend to move on. I now move to general business notice of motion number 729, standing in the name of Senator McKim. Senator McKim.
Thank you, President. I seek leave to amend notice of motion number 729 in the terms circulated in the chamber.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted. Senator McKim.
Thank you, President. I ask that general business notice of motion number 729 as amended be taken as a formal motion.
Is there any objection to this motion being taken as formal? There being none, I call Senator McKim.
Thanks, President. I move the motion.
So the question is that general business notice of motion number 729 as amended by Senator McKim be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. lock the doors. So the question is that general business notice of motion number 729, standing in the name of Senator McKim as amended, be agreed to. The ayes shall move to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint Senator Urquhart as teller for the ayes and Senator Cadell as teller for the noes. Order. There being 34 ayes and 30 noes, the matter is resolved in the affirmative. We now pass the hard marker at 12:15. Senator Wong.
No.
Is leave granted? Leave is not granted, Senator Wong.
Notice I move that so much of standing orders be suspended as would prevent me moving a motion to provide for consideration of a matter, namely a motion to allow a motion relating to the routine of business for today to be moved and determined immediately, and I move that the question be now put.
So the question is that the question be put. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the noes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. Lock the doors. So the question is that the question be put. The ayes shall move to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint Senator Grogan as teller for the ayes and Senator Cadell as teller for the noes. Senator McKim. Order. There being 34 ayes and 32 noes, the matter is resolved in the affirmative. So the question now is that the motion to suspend standing orders be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Senator McKim.
I wish to make a contribution on the question that is before the chair.
I need to put the question, Senator McKim.
Oh, it's already been put without debate. Okay.
I'll put the question again. The question now is that the motion to suspend standing orders be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Those against say no. No. The noes have it. I didn't have one single voice. I'm going to put it again. The question now is that the motion to suspend... Order! Order! The question now is that the motion... Order! Senator McKenzie. The question now is that the motion to suspend standing orders be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Against? No. I believe the ayes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. Oh, I beg your pardon. There's been no debate, so we're ringing them for 1. Lock the doors. So the question now is that the motion to suspend standing orders be agreed to. The ayes shall move to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint Senator Grogan as teller for the ayes and Senator Cadell as teller for the noes. Order. There being 34 ayes and 32 noes, the matter is resolved in the affirmative. Minister Wong.
I move that a motion relating to the routine of business for today may be moved immediately.
Thank you. So the question is, the motion is moved by Minister Wong be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 1 minute. Lock the doors. So the question is that the motion is moved by Minister Wong be agreed to. The ayes shall move to the right of the chairs, the noes to the left. I appoint Senator Grogan as teller for the ayes and Senator Cadell as teller for the noes. Order. There being 33 ayes and 31 noes, the matter is resolved in the affirmative. Minister Wong.
I move the motion as circulated and note that I did not set up the procedure such that this was moved without amendment or debate, so there is ability to have both debate and amendments now.
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, President. Well, here we have this government again, yet another attempt in terms of the chaotic approach to try to ram through legislation, and having been sent a pretty clear message by the crossbench this morning, who knows what deals have been done, who knows what undertakings have been given to actually get the government to a position where they're now still going to ram through a record number of bills, adding to their record tally, and a remarkable tally it is too. A government that has already in 3 years guillotined more bills than the previous government did in the previous 9 years is just adding to that tally. But the big question is, where is online safety? Where is the online safety bill? Why has that not featured in the government's guillotine list? Where are the migration bills? Why have they not featured in the government's guillotine list? Is this because the Greens' tail is wagging the government dog? Is that entirely what's happening here? The Greens are dictating the terms of what the government can or cannot legislate? A shocking sign of things to come if the voters get it wrong at the next election. A shocking sign of what could occur if the Greens are left to drive the government's agenda in the future. The opposition, as I said this morning, is clear about a willingness to constructively pass what would still be a significant amount of legislation today, and a significant amount of legislation even though we have limited time to debate it. But instead, the government has doubled down on this reckless approach, this contemptuous approach towards the Senate, and of course is piling through all of these other bills. So I do ask the government to give that clarity to the chamber. Where is online safety? Where is migration? What are your plans? Obviously, you've sliced and diced what you tried to put through this morning to go and get something with the Greens. Well, we want to see important things done, things the Prime Minister said were important, things the Prime Minister said should happen this week. And where are they? Why is the government walking away from, allegedly, its own priorities? And in many cases for these bills, things that are a long way short of actual government priorities. The President, this is for Senator Chisholm, Senator Farrell, in the absence of Senator Wong, to make clear what's the go. If the chamber signs up to this, what else is the chamber going to be asked to sign up for? So, for the crossbenchers who have been lobbied and cajoled and dealt whatever it is to get their vote in relation to this, they ought to know what's going to come next. Having said they're going to stand against guillotine of such proportion this morning, having said they stand against a guillotine of some of the things the coalition thinks should happen, is the government going to be honest with those crossbenchers? Yes. Or are they just going to see this motion pass and then, lo and behold, here's another alternate approach that gives the government all that it wants? Where's the honesty? Where's the decency? Where's the proper process? Where's the transparency? We don't know what deals have been struck. We don't know what's about to come next from the government. And of course, it's a government continuing to break all of the promises that it made to the Australian people. So, President, the invitation lies on the government. Make it clear for the crossbench. Be upfront and honest about them. What's coming next? Is this it? And online safety is dead and gone for this year? Or do you actually have plans to get the other things done? And if so, what are those plans? Let us all know.
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Senator McKim.
Thank you, President. I appreciate the courtesy of the chamber there, and I also want to place on the record our appreciation to Senator Wong and the government for establishing this debate in such a way that senators could make contributions to it, and that amendments may be moved to the government's legislation. So the Australian Greens would like to make a few points on the way through here. Firstly, I would like to foreshadow an amendment to this motion, and that will be an amendment that either just has been or shortly will be circulated in my name, and that is to include the Treasury Laws Amendment Mergers and Acquisitions Reform Bill 2024 in the tranche of bills which this motion establishes in section D. The reason we'll be doing that is because it is really critical around the issue of the consolidation of corporate power in Australia that the ACCC be given the powers that it has long been requesting and which the government has formulated in that bill to which I have just referred. It is critical for the reason that corporate power has been growing in Australia for decades now. We are seeing in many sectors of our economy a situation where big corporations are consolidating their market power. That means, of course, that competition in a range of sectors in our economy is less than it should be, and the losers there, in terms of corporate, in terms of low levels of competition, the losers there, of course, are the consumers of Australia, and we see that nowhere more than in the supermarket sector, where the market dominance of Coles and Woolworths has crept ever higher over the last few decades, to where we find ourselves now, where those two giant supermarket corporations, who each make $1 billion plus a year in annual profits, now together make up over 2/3 of the food and grocery sector in Australia. That's why the Greens moved to establish the Senate Select Committee into supermarket prices, and we were very pleased that as a result of that political pressure and the power that the Greens embody in this place, that forced the government to ask the ACCC to do a similar inquiry into the power of the supermarket corporations and their pricing practices, among other things. Now, the ACCC is moving through that process. We've had some updates from the ACCC. We've even had an interim report from the ACCC, and the Australian Greens, and I'm sure every Australian who ends up going through the checkout at Coles and Woolworths and getting a rude shock about their grocery bills on a regular basis, I am sure every Australian in that circumstance also looks forward to the final report of the ACCC and the final verdict of the ACCC on the pricing practices of supermarkets, and importantly on the concentration of market power in the supermarket sector and the impacts of that concentration of market power on competition. Now, the Australian Greens have been very clear that we believe that the supermarket sector is too concentrated, and that we believe that divestiture powers should be introduced in this country to provide the ACCC with the power to go to the courts and apply for a divestiture order in the case that a corporation has misused its market power, and for the courts to make relevant orders that would result in an improvement in levels of competition, potentially in a particular geographic area, or by other means. Now, very pleased that the Coalition has announced that they will support, or do support, divestiture laws in the supermarket sector, and I firmly believe that's because of the work of the Select Committee, and I want to acknowledge my colleagues on that committee. I notice Senator Cadell is currently in the chamber, and there were others, including Senator Tyrrell, who's not currently in the chamber, Senator Stirl. There was a range of people, but that committee worked really collaboratively to get to the bottom of a range of issues, not just limited, I might add, to consumer issues, but limited to the way that the big supermarket corporations treat their suppliers, which is often Australian family farms who, and we heard, I'm sure Senator Cadell would agree with this, we heard some heartrending testimony from farmers or from people who'd formerly had a life on the farm or a business in the agricultural sector in our country, of how the giant supermarket corporations treated them, and they misused their market power in terms of the way that they purchased products from farmers. And many farmers, again, this is based on evidence that we heard. It's also based in conversations that I've had with farmers in my home state of Tasmania, and I know other members of the committee had similar conversations with people on the land in their local areas. But many farmers were just simply too scared of retribution to even activate complaints against the big supermarket corporations when they believed that they were being treated poorly in negotiations. So that's why. Sorry. Okay, that's why we would be more than happy. In fact, that's why we will be moving to include the Treasury Laws Amendment mergers and acquisitions reform. Not because, I hasten to add, not because that will create divestiture powers, because it won't, but what it will do is allow the ACCC to adequately assess proposals for mergers that come before them. And even though this, in the area of competition, that bill of itself won't deliver everything the Australian Greens think needs to happen, because we do believe that we should have divestiture powers, but that mergers bill will in fact assist in preventing further concentration of competition in Australia, which will be a very good thing, given that we've seen far too much consolidation of market power in Australia in recent decades. Deputy President, I'm just going to seek your advice procedurally on whether I need to seek leave to move that amendment, or whether it has in fact been circulated in my name.
I was just actually asking that question, so
okay, I
was anticipating.
I'll just stay on my feet until that.
You're seeking, probably, if I'm anticipating your contribution, a simple amendment to the motion that's currently being debated by the chamber. Is that correct? By adding
yes, and my advice is it has been circulated.
Okay,
Deputy President.
Well, then you can move it.
So
you could have moved it even if it was just one bill, because it allows flexibility for a very simple amendment.
Thank you. Well, I do move the amendment that's been circulated in my name. And just to be clear,
could you just bear with me until we get it? But actually hasn't been circulated, so perhaps, given it's simple, you're adding one bill, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
It's appropriate to do it as you stand there.
All right. Well, I move to add in section D of the motion the Treasury Laws Amendment Mergers and Acquisitions Reform Bill 2024.
That would be 21, I reckon, in Roman numerals on the second page of the current motion. Is that correct? I just got it absolutely right. All right, so I'm going to take that as moved, okay, from the floor. Yeah, Senator Roberts.
Will we have an opportunity to continue the debate about the motion after the vote?
So the debate can continue.
Thank you.
And when the debate has concluded, I will put the amendment as moved by Senator McKim, and then no matter whatever happens to that, I will put the substantive motion. Yep. So you have the call.
Thank you, Deputy President. A lot of people this morning in the crossbench said we had far too many motions, far too many bills to consider. They said a lot of things very, very strongly about guillotines. The same people are now supporting guillotines, okay, not of 30 bills, but of 20 bills. XX is 20, Senator Canavan. Okay, thank you, Senator Canavan. Some of these are significant bills. Some of these are highly significant bills. So we had all the talk this morning about democracy, doing a proper job representing the people. Staff workloads, all collapsed. Now we've got 27 bills. Collapsed. That's a fraud. In my view, that's a fraud. Presenting one thing this morning, coming back and agreeing to basically the same thing. And we have the online staff bill left out. So that was good news. But wait! We've got the Liberal National Party moving an amendment to put this online safety bill back into the guillotine. Back into the guillotine. One of the most far-reaching and consequential bills ever, and it's back in, thanks to the Liberal National Party. All the talk about democracy. What deals were done? What deals were done selling out the people again? We've got the crossbench moving to the government, and we've got the other cheek of the uni party moving to the government. And now we've got the Greens, who also opposed the guillotine this morning, wanting to add another bill to the guillotine this afternoon. This is just extraordinary. It'll leave only the United Australia Party and One Nation, and perhaps some of the stronger coalition senators with us. But I can make a guarantee about one thing: that this Senate will continue to sell out the Australian people. And I can make a guarantee about a second thing: that One Nation will keep serving the people, keep ensuring scrutiny of these bills. Let's see who among the LNP will not support the amendment.
Okay. So, yes.
A bit as well. On the amendment.
Yes, he has. So Senator Wong, he's moved it from the. It hasn't been circulated, but he moved it from. So he's moved. Yeah. No. I'm talking about Senator Birmingham. But on the Greens. No. Senator. Okay, back to the Senator Birmingham. There has been no. The only thing that's been moved is a substantive motion of Senator Wong's, which is an order of changing the order of business for the day, and Senator McKim has moved to include the Treasury Laws Amendment, Mergers and Acquisition Reform. There has been no amendments moved by any other member of the chamber. Thank you. Yeah, I'll give you the call.
Mr. President, before I close this debate, can I clarify what we will be doing, which I did